Chapter 11 of the 2025 MotoGP World Championship brings the world's fastest rider to Eastern Germany with the aim of the game, taming their tight and twisty Sachsenring. It's the 27th visit to the shortest track on the calendar, and it's all eyes on Marc Marquez to see if he can sit back on the throne as the king of the Sachsenring. It's time to race in MotoGP. So as mentioned, this is our 27th visit to the Sachsenring. It all started here back in 1998. Changed to its current layout in 2003. The shortest track on the calendar, just 3.67 kilometers in length, 2.28 miles. One of 6 anti-clockwise venues on the calendar, with Aragon, Austin, Valencia, Phillip Island and the new Balaton Park. It's all about the left-handers, which is why Marc Marquez has a particular love affair with the Sachsenring. Turn 13. Maybe some late drama coming there in the 30-lap Grand Prix. 1, 12 and 13, the most demanding braking points, and with so many left-handers, 10 left-handers here, the highest stress zone through those second and third sectors. As mentioned, turn 13. This is a real intense battle between Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin Lachi. Martin due back on track next week in Brno. So in what was a wet sprint Saturday here on the Sachsenring, Marc Marquez flying away from pole position, but an early mistake on the factory Ducati dropped the Spaniard back down to 5th place. What a start it was for factory Yamaha star Fabio Quartararo, who was immediately in podium contention after a brilliant couple of first laps. Marco Bezzecchi though led for 14 of the 15 laps in the wet conditions in the sprint, before Marc Marquez delivered more late fireworks to cruise over the line to his 10th sprint success of 2025. Marco Bezzecchi continuing with his purple patch on the factory Aprilia. That's now 3 successive podiums for the Italian, and for just the second time on sprint Saturdays, it was Fabio Quartararo who found himself collecting a bronze medal. More domination on Saturdays for Marc Marquez, having taken his 73rd Premier Class pole position in what was a very wet Q2 session yesterday morning. Well, he is 78 points clear of brother Alex in the World Championship. Of course, this German Grand Prix in the Sachsenring, in front of what is always one of the biggest and most passionate crowds of the season, brings us to the halfway point of a season which has gone superbly so far, hasn't it, for 32-year-old Spaniard Marc Marquez. Big day coming up for him, his 200th MotoGP start, as he looks to reign supreme once again and regain his status as the undisputed Saxon King. Will it be a wet Grand Prix? Will it be a dry Grand Prix? Or will it be a flag-to-flag scenario, as in a hurry to get himself limbered up and ready for action in the factory Aprilia garage? That is Marco Bezzecchi. Well, as we saw from those live pictures a few months ago, there are still some very ominous, dark and threatening grey clouds that are hovering above our heads here in Eastern Germany. A few weather forecasts were saying a 20-25% chance of rain around 2 p.m. local time here this afternoon, which is when we're due for lights out. Over 30 laps in this Liqui Moly Grand Prix of Germany, in the company of Matt Burt and Lewis Sotheby in the commentary box, with Jack Appleyard down in pit lane. I know that Jack's going to be busy making sure that what the clouds above us are potentially doing. At the moment it is dry, and let's hope it stays that way, because in the wet yesterday, well, Marc Marquez, Lewis, how often have we said this? Well, 10 times so far this year. He was simply just too fast, too strong and too good in the sprint yet again.
Made life hard for himself at the start, didn't he? As he did in Mugello when he botched the start there. Went wide at turn 1 and dropped down to 4th/5th. He was battling for that through the first lap with Fabio Di Gianantonio. But ultimately, Marco Bezzecchi, when I spoke to him yesterday, said he kind of understood once it said plus 93 on his pit board that he was going to come under some intense late pressure. That is exactly what happened in those latter stages, and Marc Marquez, faced with the opportunity to fight for a sprint win on the last lap, decided to go away from thinking about the World Championship and thinking about the gold medal, which he duly collected.
Getting himself limbered up and ready for action is Fermin Aldeguer outside the Gresini Racing trucks. Are rather him than me, I'm going to say. That does not look like a very comfortable experience. He'll be using those neck muscles, though, to look skywards, won't he, in a few moments' time. Because we had it was a full soaking wet Saturday here at the Sanctuary. It wasn't long actually after yesterday's sprint where the heavens actually opened here. In fact, the Northern Talent Cup race was red flagged because there was such a deterioration in conditions. But he did it again, and as mentioned, he tripped up over his own shoelace a little bit. Got a great start from pole position. Didn't he? Joan Zarco going backwards on that medium rain tyre, but Marquez desperate to try and make sure he wasn't passed on the run to the first corner. Charged in that little bit too hot. He's going to drop back in just ahead of Fabio Quartararo. Had a twitch there on the factory Yamaha coming out of turn 1. And then it was just all about a rapid recovery from the 93. It wasn't without its big scares and its big moments, but this was at the start of the very last lap, having done all of the front running after Mark's early mistake in that first corner. Briefly through on Bezzecchi into turn 1, and then having the inside line down through 2. Mark eventually taking the checker flag, nearly a second clear of Marco Bezzecchi. He has now taken 129 of the 132 sprint points available so far in 2025. That is some record, isn't it, for Mark? When you look at Marco Bezzecchi, who's 6th in the World Championship, on 130 points throughout the whole season. Big payday sprint Saturdays are delivered so far for Marc Marquez. And what lies in store, Lewis, on the opposite side of the factory Ducati guys, because it was painful actually to watch Pecco Bagnaia struggling so much in the wet condition, not just in the sprint yesterday but in qualifying. He said himself lost for words, speechless to explain such an alarming drop in performance.
Felt like he was riding on ice yesterday. He's just had no rear grip in the wet conditions, so Pecco Bagnaia will certainly be one of those, I guess, looking up at the skies and perhaps hoping that the rain stays away. Although you do wonder from the front of the 4th row as he starts now in 10th place, whether the more chaos the better for Pecco Bagnaia to try and bring him into contention. Joan Zarco started 2nd yesterday in the sprint. Much like in qualifying, he went for the medium Michelin rain tyre. He was one of only 2 riders in the sprint who went for the medium rear, and it was very clear from the early stages that that was not working out for the Frenchman.
Yeah, early on, just no grip, so he really struggled to get temperature in the tyres. When he did so and got going, he was rapid. He set the 2nd fastest lap of the sprint yesterday, did Zarco, but just surrendered far too much time at the beginning. He would have known from the get-go when he lit it up off the line that he wasn't going to maybe have the traction that he was anticipating. You saw there on the outside Frankie Morbidelli darting immediately through as Mark runs wide. Frankie Morbidelli, unfortunately, one of a growing casualty list here this weekend in this German Grand Prix. Zarco then picked off by Mark and Fabio Di Gianantonio. It was a really scary crash late on in the sprint yesterday for Morbidelli. Unfortunately, it has ruled out a nasty blow to his left shoulder after repeated high-speed barrel rolls through the gravel trap when he touched the white line, breaking into turn 8. Morbidelli, sadly absent and already back in Italy, I believe, undergoing treatment on his left shoulder after that heavy crash. Of course, we were already missing Maverick Vinales for Red Bull KTM Tech 3 after he fractured his left collarbone in a Q2 crash yesterday. No Enea Bastianini at any stage so far this weekend in Germany, having been diagnosed with a bout of appendicitis pre this Grand Prix. And of course, we're missing Somkiat Chantra as well, with a serious right knee injury he suffered a couple of weeks ago in training. Fabio Quartararo was dynamite, wasn't he, off the line here at the start of the sprint yesterday. Just look at him carve through the pack early on.
From 7th on the grid, he's now past Alex Marquez, who's just on our right-hand side. A little bit of contact from the front aero to Fabio Quartararo's hip and back. That was Marc Marquez, who was recovering from his moment at turn 1. Round the outside of him and Joan Zarco. That put Quartararo already up into 3rd place, 3 corners into yesterday's Tito sprint. That would then become 2nd, of course, with Frankie Morbidelli's crash out of 2nd place. And despite, of course, falling victim to the rampant Marc Marquez in the 2nd half of the sprint, Quartararo was able to hang on for a slightly against the run of play podium in the sprint, you have to say. Yamaha not always particularly strong in the wet, but with grip levels fairly high in the conditions yesterday, they were, and Fabio Quartararo collects his 2nd sprint medal.
Still can't believe I'm saying this. It's the German Grand Prix of 2022, the last time Fabio Quartararo was victorious in a MotoGP race. There is confirmation that Maverick Vinales had to withdraw from this German Grand Prix due to a small fracture in his left collarbone. This vicious, nasty high side in the treacherous conditions. This was on his outlap in Q2. Just losing the rear. Jack Miller had the same crash, but Miller unfortunately, Vinales rather unfortunately, ruled out of contention. We have no KTM Tech 3 representation here, sadly, today. And just 18 riders scheduled to line up on the grid with Morbidelli sideline, Vinales, Bastianini and Chantra, as we mentioned. We might be closer to our normal entry list of 22 next weekend. We do know that Taka Nakagami will substitute for Chantra in Brno next time out. There's a few murmurings that Polispargo is dusting off the leathers, potentially to take one of possibly two vacant seats in Red Bull KTM Tech 3. And let's hope Frankie Morbidelli's back in action as well. Of course, at Brno, he was on our last Brno podium 5 years ago, back in 2020.
I imagine there'll be quite a few riders lighting up Hervé Poncheral's phone, trying to get a ride on that Tech 3 KTM next weekend, given that it is the return of the Czech Grand Prix at Brno next weekend, which MotoGP rider, past or present, wouldn't want to race around that particular resurfaced venue next weekend.
Well, he's popular in Germany, Fabio Quartararo, just telling those young autograph hunters, I have to go racing now. Fabio did not want to abruptly call halt to those young autograph hunters, but yeah, he has the small matter of 30 racing laps around the Sachsenring to deal with here in Germany. Not just popular, of course, here in the Saxony region of Germany. He is a hugely popular figure for MotoGP fans all around the world. Well, it's a pretty big conundrum, a pretty big question. How on earth do you beat Marc Marquez around the Sachsenring on a factory Ducati? Pole position yesterday in the rain, a brilliant recovery to win his 10th sprint of the season, but today is the big one. Today is the one that he wants. Winless here in the Sachsenring since 2021. He was missing, of course, in 2022 and 2023 through injuries. A win this afternoon would be his 9th around this iconic venue, and it would move him second in terms of the most MotoGP wins at the same circuit, behind Italian legend Giacomo Agostini, who managed to win 10 at the Imatra circuit in Finland. No question, as we mentioned, the bookies, well, they have made Marc Marquez an overwhelming odds-on favourite. Well, unfortunately, as we mentioned, this 30-lap German Grand Prix is not going to feature any rider from Tech 3, with no Bastianini involved at all this weekend after being diagnosed with appendicitis. Maverick Vinales ruled out after his Q2 crash yesterday. Let's hope that Maverick's going to be declared fit. Let's hope both of them can return to action in Brno next weekend. The man in the know will be the boss, Nico Goyer, and who joins Jack?
Yeah, he does indeed. I mean, talk about bad luck, Nico. I can't remember for a long time both riders being unable to race in Sunday's Grand Prix. Firstly, let's touch on Maverick. Obviously, a big one yesterday. How is he this morning, and how likely is a return next week, of course, in Brno?
Well, he had not such a big crash yesterday, to be honest, and when I saw him walking and moving the arm, then I said, okay, let's pick up the bike and try to finish the session. But unfortunately, as we saw, he's been taken to medical center. His left shoulder went out, so they had to put it back in the medical center. And unfortunately, they detect a small crack in the shoulder. So after further examination, then they discovered that yeah, it was a proper crack and that needed further examination. So went to hospital, and unfortunately, he's going to go to surgery very soon to try to fix the issue as quick as possible. So yeah, he'll miss Brno for sure, and then yeah, that's the point. Then we just wish him a speedy recovery. Shoulder is not easy to recover, but we are quite confident that he might come back after the summer break.
Yeah, fingers crossed. At least the summer break comes at the right time to help with the rehabilitation. For Enea, obviously, it's been out for the entirety of the weekend. I understand when I spoke to Hervé on Friday that he was starting to see the other side and starting to feel a little bit better. How is he this morning?
Yeah, we had a call with him yesterday afternoon. He was back at home, so he's feeling obviously better. He needed to go today again in the hospital. They are trying to understand what happened to him, where did it come from. It's probably a virus, but yeah, definitely he's feeling better. He's recovering, and well, we have a high chance to see him in Brno.
In terms of the replacement for Maverick in Brno, Paul, have you asked him to bring his levers?
Yeah, well, it is obviously the first name that come out every mouth. So it's probably one possibility. I mean, all KTM is trying to evaluate the situation. So we'll have an official announcement soon, I think.
I mean, whoever it is, Paul's got a pretty good record at Brno. Track knowledge that not a lot of eyes have got, and Danny is absolutely superb around Brno. So you should have a fast replacement, whoever it is.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, no, and plus I think for sure the last time that KTM raced in Brno, we won the race. I mean, KTM won the race, so the time has gone so far. So we don't know. Every bike evaluated now. Ducati is super strong, so we don't know what's going to happen. But yes, it'll be interesting to see our bike there.
We'll give our best to Maverick, and we look forward to seeing Enea back in Brno.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, here, Jack. Yeah, let's hope that in Brno next weekend they can be back to full strength with the Beast back in action and Maverick Vinales. If they're not, I'll tell you what, I would love to see Danny Pedrosa back at Brno. We know he did have a great record, some titanic battles back in Pedrosa's pomp. Still very active, of course, as KTM's test rider. He was in Misano, wasn't he, just a few days ago? So if they do need a sub, I know they've got Polispargo waiting in the wings, but stick Danny on it.
Winner of that Grand Prix back in 2012 in one of the great MotoGP head-to-heads with Jorge Lorenzo. Ayagura, who always wears the same expression, really, doesn't he, in the Trackhouse box, whether it's going well or whether it's going badly. Well, it's fair to say this weekend it's been going rather badly by his very high standards in his rookie season. Hasn't looked comfortable or quick at all in the wet conditions so far this weekend, which is why he's 17th on our grid of 18. Of course, he's promoted up 2 places due to the absence today of Maverick Vinales and Frankie Morbidelli. Ayagura, who did take a podium here in Moto2 last year, get the feeling he might be quite keen to see the back of the Saxon ring.
Well, Jack Miller back to where it all began back in 2011, making his Grand Prix debut there here at the Saxon ring. That was his crew chief there. Sorry, Giacomo Guidotti. With Jack just having a bit of banter inside the garage, and then Giacomo got the remote control and was trying to turn the volume down on Jack. It was absolutely brilliant. There's some great camaraderie inside the Prix Yamaha garage. As we told you, the Saxon ring, one of 6 anti-clockwise circuits now on the current MotoGP calendar, joining Aragon, joining Austin, Valencia, Phillip Island, of course, mainstays of the Grand Prix calendar for so many years, but also anti-clockwise in length or in configuration is our newest Grand Prix venue. Looking forward to that in a few weeks' time when we return from our summer break, the Austrian and Hungarian doubleheader. The anti-clockwise Balaton Park. World Superbikes, of course, their next adventure after today's action, Donington Park. Will they pick up the action? Well, we know he's got a stellar record at anti-clockwise tracks, doesn't he, Marc Marquez? 11 times he's already been victorious here across the 3 Grand Prix classes he's competed in. Brad Binder, well, I'm sure there'll be some special emotions when he goes back into the Brno paddock next weekend. 5 years after his breakthrough first victory in MotoGP, what was, of course, just his 3rd ever start in the Premier class. Gotta say, there's a few nervy-looking, anxious faces down in pit lane, certainly down here on the grid, as we're getting no respite at all from the heavy cloud cover, which has closed in on the Saxon ring over the last hour or so. There has been a few light spots of rain. I think Joan Zarco would be bothered if teams are down right now, or if we get a flag-to-flag situation.
Yeah, if you look at the pit lane, you'll see 2 of each bike in pit lane as every team is preparing themselves for the eventuality of a flag-to-flag race. They'll have 1 bike set up for the dry, 1 bike set up for the wet, and it looks like Marc Marquez here is scrubbing in a set of wets on his first sighting lap in anticipation of potentially needing them in the race. Fail to prepare to fail. Jack, a weather update from you.
Yeah, in terms of what we're seeing at the moment, it does look as though everything's cleared up. The sun has come out, the clouds have started to disperse, which is excellent news, and the vast majority of the weather radars, each team using a different one, is saying that we should get a dry race. There are one or two that are maybe thinking we could get some light showers in the final sort of final third, of the race, but the consensus is we should have a dry one ahead of us. The big talking point amongst the teams is the front tyre choice, whether they go medium or hard. Now, when the sun was out earlier, everyone was saying with the track temperature rising up that the hard is likely to be the best option. But now that it's started to cool off just ever so slightly, it could well be a big decision between the medium and the hard. The medium will be very, very good at the start, but he's going to get a lot of stress on that left-hand side of the tyre. The hard will be able to put up with the stresses of the left-hand side, but the key thing with it is making sure you've got temperature when you eventually have to turn right. That's going to be one of the big decisions down here on the grid.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jack. Yeah, Michelin Motorsport boss Piero Talamasso pre-weekend said the Sachsenring is one of two of the most difficult tracks that they have to contend with on the calendar, the other being Phillip Island, of course, with the excessive forces that go through the rear tyre, particularly through the fast left-hander that brings you onto the Gardner Straight. 10 left corners here in Germany for the riders to contend with. Johann Zarco just acknowledging what I'm sure is always going to be a bumper crowd here in the Sachsenring. When they did the rider parade this morning, shortly after the 10-minute warm-up session, I think Fabio Quartararo and Johann Zarco were quite pleasantly surprised by the rather large contingent of French fans that have come to this German Grand Prix. Well, I guess the last time there was sort of a question mark over the weather conditions, the French fans went home pretty happy, didn't they, in the home Grand Prix, which Johann Zarco prevailed at in that unforgettable Le Mans clash.
Licio Cecchinello with his many connections. Of course, as a pilot, he has all the weather apps that many in the pit lane do not have access to, and he certainly called it spot on. And the LCR squad had the very best up-to-date information in terms of what the weather was going to do on that Sunday at Le Mans. So many will be peering over Lucio's shoulder on the grid to see what the weather's going to do. Marc Marquez, having stripped in that set of tyres, has now gone to the grid on his dry shod bike.
Well, at least our drone got close to him
Yeah.
briefly. Let's hope some of the MotoGP rivals can run the hot pace that I'm sure Mark is going to be setting over 30 laps. Coming up in, what, about 25 minutes time, we'll be underway. Great shot of this compact, tight, unique Sachsenring circuit. It's a busy lap around the Sachsenring. You barely get any respite. You're always having to put some kind of input into the motorcycle. Particularly tough for those that are walking wounded, carrying injuries. Like you think of Alex Marquez, second in the World Championship, first time off the podium ceremony in the sprint yesterday in 2025 is Alex. Of course, it was 2 weeks ago where he fractured the left index finger after contact early on with Pedro Acosta. So the sighting lap for Marc Marquez as he sets his sights on yet more Sachsenring domination. It's almost one that you can sort of tick off when the calendar's announced, isn't it, as a potential pole, sprint win, Grand Prix win, treble for Marc. But he has touched upon it a few times this weekend. He has to keep his feet firmly on terra firma. Overconfidence certainly got the better of him here in the Sachsenring last year, when he had the big crash in practice at turn 11, fractured a finger, a couple of painful rib blows as well. 13th to 2nd in the Grand Prix, and of course fresh in his mind will be Jerez and Austin earlier on this season, particularly Austin when he bailed out when well clear of the chasing pack.
Yeah, you feel that if he fails to convert this pole position into victory, it would be a shock even greater than his failure to do so in Austin. Another weekend, of course, where we had a little bit of inclement weather around. Marc Marquez famously bolting off the grid before the Grand Prix even got underway. Will we see any scenes similar to that if rain falls in the run-up to the Grand Prix? Of course, the procedure has been tidied up a bit since then.
Well, let's find out if he can control himself a little bit more today than yesterday, because he did say when he was in the heat of the battle, he did keep trying to remind himself, Mark, you've got a championship to think about here. You're second, that's a really strong finish. But of course, this is Marc Marquez. It's his natural DNA to go for the jugular. The killer instinct took over, and he said, yeah, I'll hold my hand up. I was taking far, far too many risks. It was a little bit too close for comfort at times in the sprint. Will he just be able to rein himself in that little bit as he looks to rein again here at the Sachsenring?
Well, here comes the grid. While you look at the grid, which is Marc Marquez, Johann Zarco, Marco Bezzecchi on your front row, Pedro Acosta starts from the second row in 4th. He is, of course, promoted by the absence of Frankie Morbidelli. Alex Marquez and Fabio Quartararo complete row 2. Gian Antonio 7th from Jack Miller and Brad Binder. Pecco Bagnaia, he gains a place on the grid from 11th up to 10th. Miguel Oliveira now starts alongside him with Fermin Aldeguer up onto row 4. Luca Marini, Ralph Fernandez and Joan Mir are on row 5, with Alex Rins, Iagora and Lorenzo Savadori completing your grid. A depleted grid of 18, of course, with neither Tech 3 KTM, no Sonkia Chantra and no Frankie Morbidelli.
Yeah, sadly missing Frankie Morbidelli. We send the Italian his best wishes as he recovers from that horrible crash yesterday at Turn 8. Fabio Di Gianantonio just off the podium though in the sprint yesterday. Let's get some thoughts from there. Boss Pablo Nieto, who joins Jack.
Yeah, of course, Fabio fastest on Friday. Pace looked absolutely excellent. Yesterday was its own thing with the weather conditions, but now up onto the front of row 3 of the grid, there must be real optimism that there's a big result here for Fabio.
Yeah, but we know that this track is a little bit difficult to make overtakes, and then you have first corner, maybe the last one. But it's really, really important to make a good start, try to make a very good first, second lap, and then we will see. Also here, weather is going to be very, very important, because you never know what happened. Then check if it's race flag to flag or not, and then we will see. Always hard.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks to Pablo Nieto. Digia's 4th place in that sprint yesterday was his 8th top 6 in 9 of our 11 sprints so far, so he's been there or thereabouts on the short formats on Saturday afternoons. Well, the German fans have seen it several times, 11 times in the past. The number 93 take the spoils here in a Grand Prix at the Sachsenring. There was a period of time where Marc Marquez just ran right in this Grand Prix. Last year, of course, when he finished second to Pecco Bagnaia from a lowly 13th on the grid, was actually the first time that Marc Marquez had ever actually been beaten around this Sachsenring circuit. So he is out for revenge here this afternoon.
Of course, it is a landmark day for Marc Marquez. He starts his 200th MotoGP Grand Prix. Right next to him on the front row is Johann Zarco. Let's get some words from the Frenchman now with Jack.
Well, Johann, it didn't go to plan yesterday, but like you said yesterday evening, you've got yourself in a brilliant position here to try and attack and to try and bring some big points home. What do you think is going to be key to a good result?
There is this advantage of the first row, so I will try to take it and stay with the top guys as long as possible. I know that with the used tire I can keep a good pace. I've seen it on Friday and we were happy with the work we have done on Friday afternoon. So the most important thing is to stay with the top, at least for the first half race, and then once I will get the pace, I think I can do a nice race.
Good luck.
Yes.
Yeah, merci Johann, merci Jack as well. Thanks to the 34-year-old Frenchman, not 34 for too long, he turns 35 next week. Does Zarco. It's best qualifying on the Honda so far. Second on the grid. Actually, it was his 31st sprint for HRC yesterday, only the 5th time he's scored points, but you did sense more than a tinge of disappointment when Zarco spoke to the media last night. That medium rear rain tyre just never came in for him in the early part of the sprint. He said yesterday it was a big opportunity, he felt, not just to take a first sprint podium, but to take a victory. Opportunities which don't come around too often when you're on an improving Honda. But yeah, what can Zarco do from the middle of that front row?
Yeah, you fear potentially for him that he might be fighting a bit of a rearguard action in the early stages, because for sure in pure dry conditions there are faster riders and bikes behind him. Is one of them, Jack Miller. He comes from 8th position now on the grid, and he's now speaking to Jack.
Yeah, he is indeed. Great to be joined by Jack in the back of his garage. What's the plan for this one then?
Damn it, I mean, you know, obviously I haven't had any dry track time since Friday out, so a little bit in the unknown there. A lot of laps done on Friday morning with the medium tyre, so we'll just have to try and nurse it as best we can here and see what's back in the race. It's always a struggle around here in Sachsenring, just in terms of tyre life. We're always nursing it, and even more so when, you know, there's been barely any rubber laid down in the weekend. So, I said, the route went well, but still out for everybody.
Front tyre choice, an easy one for you?
Yeah, I think that hides the, you see that sandbag through again. Right after another 2 race, there's a couple of drops coming in, so this is kind of genuine. But no, it's quite clear. Once we track's over 30 degrees, we're good as gold with that hard front. So, yeah, we'll see what we can do with the
Look, Jack, have a good one. Cheers,
Thanks to two Jacks then down there in pit lane. Best sprint result yesterday in 20 since the Red Bull Ring last year for Miller, 5th place, and he's not lacking support here this weekend. Bumped into mother and father Miller, Peter and Sonia Miller, are here to support their son. As he mentioned, this was where his Grand Prix journey began, all the way back in 2011.
So Marc Marquez trudges down the pit lane, not too far behind our own Jack Appleyard as we glance outside the commentary box window. And as mentioned, he does celebrate a landmark Grand Prix. Both of the Marquez brothers, incidentally, celebrating a landmark today. Alex Marquez, 100 MotoGP starts for Marc Marquez. This is his 200th, which he is looking to mark with a 9th Saxon Ring victory. Of course, the numbers don't really do Marc Marquez justice. So many records that he's either equalled, broken, or on his way to breaking in his Grand Prix career. But his only focus today is on winning the German Grand Prix for the first time in 4 years and extending what is already a healthy World Championship advantage, of course, with his younger brother certainly short of 100% fitness and riding cautiously in the sprint yesterday. Marc's lead extended from 68 yesterday to 78 points.
Well, that'll cheer him up. The pole sitter has failed to win the last 4 German Grand Prix. Marc will be hoping to set that record straight. Starting to find his brilliant fast form once again is our rookie sensation from last year, Pedro Acosta. He was right in the heat of the podium battle in the sprint yesterday before he had the big, scary run-off at turn 8. Let's get the thoughts of Acosta's crew chief, Paul Trevathan, who joins Jack.
Yeah, Pedro has been knocking on the door of late. A handful of top 5 finishes. Is today the day, Paul? He's looked pretty strong all weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we have a chance. That's absolutely right. We've been from the first laps, we've shown quite good speed and good consistency, all conditions. So yeah, now I think in this a day like this, after all the wet from yesterday, it's adapting to the track conditions. You know, the guy that can do that the best. We're on the limit maybe of the temperatures for the tyre choice we have to make because of the layout of the track. So for me, it's about giving him the confidence that he needs to be able to push hard enough and understand what's going on underneath him. So the guy that can adapt to this will have a good advantage today for sure.
Good luck, have a good one.
Cheers, mate, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks to Paul Trevathan. Crew chief to Pedro Acosta, who never finished lower than 2nd in his 3 starts at the Saxon Ring in Moto3 and Moto2. Yeah, Marc Marquez busted yet another record yesterday, didn't he? His 10th sprint win of the season means, in terms of sprint wins in a single season, nobody now has won more than Marc, and we've just reached the halfway stage of the campaign. 10 victories. Today, trying to be just the 2nd Ducati rider in history to win 4 on the spin. He's already the 1st rider in history to win 3 successive sprint and Grand Prix in 3 successive races. But he has so often been the master. He has so often been the rider to beat around the Saxon Ring. You feel that's his status here once again today. A track that's tried to break him over the last couple of years, certainly in 2023, where he had 5 bruising crashes. The last in the warm-up session at turn 7. That iconic image, the famous image of him sort of slumped over the Armco on the inside of the circuit. It was also his nadir at Honda, wasn't it, really, as far as Marc's concerned. Life, he's enjoying it certainly a lot more right now in 2025, isn't he?
Well, he certainly knows from yesterday, albeit in wet conditions, where to brake or perhaps where not to brake for turn 1. And you feel that's going to be one of the few hurdles in Marc Marquez's way today, other than concentration or the weather, is getting through that first corner safely. And you feel with the start device of the Ducati, which is certainly among the class-leading devices on the grid, Marc Marquez, as long as he's fully focused, which he wasn't in the sprint in Mugello famously a couple of rounds ago, gets through that first corner first, he's got a pace to go away at the front of the race. Can anybody from that front row, either Zarco Bezzecchi or the likes of Acosta and Alex Marquez behind, can they stop that from happening?
It's all about your edge grip around this Saxon Ring circuit, all about your edge grip on the left-hand side of the front and the rear tyre, the smooth power delivery comes to the fore as well, and a tight, twisty circuit where you really do barely get out of fifth gear around this 3.6 kilometre layout. Every rider, all 18, hard front, medium rear tyre. Straight shootout then in terms of the Michelin tyre choice. This has been Ducati's territory the last 2 years. They've had the top 5 in the last 2 Grand Prix here. They have been the dominant force. Alex Marquez then, second in the World Championship. He's got it all on. It's a big task if Alex is to take his 50th career podium here this afternoon on that reshuffled grid with our injury absentees. He fires away from the middle of the second row in 5th place. There's confirmation. This is Alex's 100th Premier Class start. Grand Prix start number 235. Of course, it was right here in the Sachsenring last year. What a day it was for the Marquez siblings. As we will pause now for the national anthem. So, a record crowd, a record weekend crowd here at the Sachsenring, soaking up the atmosphere. Let's go back down to Jack on the grid. Can magic Marc Marquez produce another brilliant victory here in the Sachsenring? Let's get the thoughts of the boss start. See who joins Jack.
Yeah, the sun is shining now. It looks as though that threat of a flag to flag is pretty much gone. Davide, Marc ignored your request to think of the championship yesterday. Is he going to do the same again?
Hopefully, but at least I'm happy that the sun is out and that it will be not a race on the wet, because I think that is more dangerous. But anyway, it will be a difficult race because Bezzecchi shows that he's very competitive, and I'm sure that Costa too, it will be very fast. But anyway, again, we have to collect points to lead the championship, and that's it. Good luck. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks to Davide Tardozzi. Going to be hard pushed to think that there's going to be a Ducati Lenovo Team 1-2 in this Grand Prix. With Pecco Bagnaia stuck down at the head of the 4th row in 10th place after what was a thoroughly miserable experience in both qualifying and the sprint in the rain conditions. I think if there's going to be one rider that's mighty relieved about it being dry, Lewis, it's Pecco Bagnaia.
Yeah, said he was on ice yesterday in the wet conditions, although as you can see, the last couple of times he has started outside the top 10. He's managed to overcome that in the Grand Prix itself. Came through from 13th to win in Indonesia and 11th to 2nd in Qatar earlier on this year. Not that he would want to be in that kind of position on the grid on purpose, but he has got a good record of making up for that on the Sunday. This does, though, feel like a very different Pecco Bagnaia, who spoke yesterday of a top 5 being a realistic result.
As we said, there are very large pockets of French fans who are here to support Johann Zarco and Fabio Quartararo. And those fans are getting some serious airtime, and rightly so, as they show their allegiance for Fabio. I think there you are. Jack just telling us that they're all the Yamaha hospitality crew.
Because the second paddock is over here. This is where we are in the Coventry boxes. On the pit lane side, you've got the team trucks, but the team hospitalities are on this side, and the Yamaha boys obviously giving their riders plenty of support. Let's get a word from Grassini. Alex Marquez starts 5th. Fermin Aldeguer starts 12th. Michele Mercedes with Jack.
Yeah, I imagine Michele is happy as anyone that this is going to be held in dry conditions, given the injury that Alex is suffering. But on Friday, he told us that it wasn't affecting him too much. What kind of a result is possible today?
I think that in the dry we have a better pace for sure than in the wet. I think that the pace is to stay in front, or at least in the first 4 or 5 position. But of course, with the injury for us, the main target is to finish the race, and I think that we are able to make a good race, I think, with Alex.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks to Gresini boss Michele Massini. So he has been here and done it on 199 previous occasions. Has Marc Marquez another milestone in his glittering career about to be achieved as he prepares for MotoGP start number 200. A number he would have reached quite some time ago, wouldn't it, if it hadn't have been for such a fraught period in his career. The career-threatening injury in Jerez in 2020, but so far this season, 7 poles, 10 sprint victories, 19 podiums. The numbers don't lie, do they? Marc Marquez is head and shoulders above the competition right now in MotoGP.
Although he doesn't officially, I guess, have his title as the king of the Saxon Ring. Our most recent winner here was Pecco Bagnaia last year. A rather improbable victory on that particular day, wasn't it? With Jorge Martin handing him victory with that crash in the latter stages. That, as well as some of Marc Marquez's slip-ups this year, show that you cannot truly take anything for granted in MotoGP. They don't race on paper, they race on a Sunday afternoon around the Saxon Ring. Marc Marquez, just like the rest of them, the other 17 riders who line up on this grid, have achieved nothing yet. They've got to go out there and deliver.
Can Zarco do anything to disrupt the rhythm early on? And Marc Marquez, he was so eager to get the whole shot in the sprint yesterday and then close the door on any potential attackers into that first corner. Too eager though, wasn't he, as he ran wide, and actually made the sprint something of a spectacle yesterday as he gets himself ready. Just a few late sort of messages and signals from his crew. Up goes the 3-minute board in what are the sort of warmest and sunniest conditions of race day here in the Saxon Ring, and certainly it feels like the warmest and sunniest conditions potentially of the weekend. As Jack Miller pointed out, there has been very, very limited dry running so far here this weekend, the Saxon Ring, so they've not really been able to fully dial in the race setups. And so maybe we see a few deviations in lap times as the race unfolds. At the moment, it looks like it's unlikely we're going to get a flag-to-flag scenario, but never say never. This is MotoGP, of course. Marco Bezzecchi, for the first time in the Grand Prix on the factory of Aprilia, fires away from the front row of the grid, looking for back-to-back double podiums for the first time in his Grand Prix career as the 26-year-old Italian. Johann Zarco's best on the qualifying in 2nd place. But after he reigned supreme in the rain yesterday in the sprint, can the undisputed king of the Saxon Ring reign here today from pole?